Constitution of India, being a secular constitution, guarantees every citizen freedom of worship, which essentially means every citizen can profess, practice, and propagate one's own religion. You are right to not just believe in a religion, you have a right to practice your religion. Practices include your traditions, your customs, etc., etc. You can also propagate your religion as long as you do not indulge in inducements. Coercive attempts to change one's religion is not acceptable or not acceptable. So somebody cannot coerce you, somebody cannot force you to change your religion. Somebody cannot lure you to change your religion. So inducements for religious conversions or forced religious conversions are unacceptable. But anybody can propagate his or her own religion. So therefore, the first principle of a secular constitution, unlike a theocratic state, theocracy means theology is the study of religion. Theocracy is the rule of religion. So it is the antonym of secular state. Something opposed to secularism is theocracy. For example, Afghanistan calls itself as Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Essentially means it is not a secular country, it's not a secular constitution. So the state in Afghanistan, the government in Afghanistan, the judiciary in Afghanistan believes in Islam of their own version. Islam Islam which Taliban believes in. All believers of Islam do not perceive the religion to be the same. So there are different schools of religion. Every religion has fundamentalist faith and also moderate faith, liberal faith. Taliban represents the most fundamentalist faith of Islam. Well, a secular constitution, the primary principle is the citizens have freedom to pursue one's religion. And there will not be any discrimination based on religion. There will not be any discrimination based on religion. In fact, the Constitution of India provides for certain provisions that entail protection for minorities, including religious minorities. So it prevents discrimination based on religion. It allows every citizen to profess, practice, and propagate one's religion. In fact, it has the provisions for protection of minorities, including religious minorities. So then comes the question. Then what do you mean by secularism? Is it just providing every citizen freedom to profess, practice, and propagate one's religion? So you have to understand secularism in its various dimensions. What is the relationship between citizen and religion? So, as I told you, the secular constitution provides every citizen freedom of worship. So that is a relation between citizen and religion in a secular constitution. Then comes the question, what is the relationship between state and religion? State in political science is a concept that represents something more than the government. So courts, judiciary, executive, legislature, all come under the broad umbrella called state. For simple terms, one can use it as government, but state is beyond government. So the state, what is the relationship between state and religion? I told you the relationship between citizen and religion in a secular country. Citizen has a freedom of worship. Then what is the relationship between state and religion in a secular country? So the state is irreligious. State has no religion. Well, many people define secularism as equal treatment of all religions, religious harmony, no discrimination on the basis of religion. Well, they are essential features of secularism, but they do not alone constitute secularism. So obviously in a secular country, there is no discrimination based on religion. Obviously in a secular country, there is a religious tolerance. Intolerance based on religion is unacceptable. Obviously, secular country doesn't allow religious hatred. It doesn't allow religious disharmony. State treats all religions equally. Well, that is part of the secularism. But secularism essentially means state is irreligious. Many of those who do not accept secularism often criticize that secularism wants abolition of religion. But let me clarify, secularism is not against religion. You can be religious, still you can be secular. So secularism is not atheism. Secularism is not anti-religion. Secularism is not even non-religious in your personal life. You can be truly religious in your personal life. But when it comes to public life, secularism means you should be irreligious. I'll give a small example for you to understand this concept. Assuming that you are a judge, there are two judges. Assuming that there are two judges. Judge one is an avowed Hindu. He follows Vedas, Vedic path in his personal life, practicing Hindu, not just a believer, but a dedicated, a committed person in the practice of religion. But when he comes to court, how will he deliver judgment? Will he deliver judgment based on Hindu scriptures like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, Vedas? He follows all these Hindu scriptures in his personal life. He strictly follows the Vedic way of life. But when he delivers judgment as a judge of a court, he will deliver judgment based on the Constitution of India. Am I right? So for him, the ultimate text is the Constitution. So in his personal life, the ultimate text may be Vedas, maybe Bhagavad Gita. But in his public avatar, as a judge of a court, the ultimate text for him is the Constitution of India. So he delivers verdicts based on the Constitution. The judge, second judge, is an avowed Muslim. He follows Islamic traditions, rituals, Islamic way of life, Islamic culture in his personal life. A very committed Muslim, highly religious Muslim. And he's a judge. When he comes to the court, will he deliver judgment based on Islam? He will not. He will follow the Constitution of India to pronounce the judgments. Look at these two individuals, a very simple comparison. Both in their personal life follow different paths, different values, different traditions, different customs, different rituals, different beliefs. But when it comes to their life as judges in a court, both believe in the same text, both follow a same text called the Constitution of India. So secularism is not against following your own religion in personal life. It doesn't bore you. It doesn't abolish religion. Secular country religion is not bad. Secular country religion is not abolished. Secular constitution doesn't touch your personal life. But it only says when it comes to public life, you have to follow the secular principles. You should be irreligious. You should be above religion. So secular constitution distinguishes between personal life and a public life. So therefore, secularism essentially means state has no religion. State is irreligious. So there is no relationship between state and religion. What is the religion of the government of India? No religion. What is the religion of Narendra Modi as an individual? Well, he is a Hindu. He declared himself as a committed Hindu. So in his personal life, he is a Hindu. But in his role as the Prime Minister of the country, the office of the Prime Minister has no religion. So office of the Prime Minister is irreligious. It doesn't mean it is anti-religion. It only means it's nothing to do with religion. Well, you may say, sir, many ministers, chief ministers, while swearing in ceremonies, while swearing in as ministers, inaugurating several governmental activities, follow the religious practices. Well, some of them follow the religious practices of all the four religions, all the four religions at least. At least the three religions they follow: Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity. But that is a deviation from the secular practice. Normally, any secular activities like swearing in ceremony, like inauguration of a public activity, government funded functions, should not have any religious practice. But instead of keeping religion away from such activities, over a period of time, we equated it with following multi-religious protocols. Well, that is a deviation, but over a period of time, it has become an acceptable deviation, equating secularism with equality towards all religions. Equality towards all religions is certainly a feature of secular constitution, but more than that, secularism essentially entails state has no religion. So therefore, secularism doesn't believe in banning religion, abolishing religion. It doesn't believe in promoting atheism. It only says religion is personal life. When it comes to public life, you should be above religion. That is only the simple principle. Then comes the question, how does the citizen's right to religion operate in a secular constitution? Well, as I told you in the beginning, every citizen in a secular India has a freedom to profess, practice, propagate one's own religion. Well, but is this freedom absolute? Is this freedom unlimited? Is this freedom immune to any kind of restrictions? So then this comes the question. Does the government have a right to intervene in citizens' beliefs, citizens' religious faith? If so, to what extent? So this is another question. In our country, we have several rights, fundamental rights, like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to pursue any avocation or any business. You can follow, you can be a member of any association, you can protest. All these are fundamental rights. But no fundamental right in India is absolute. Suppose you have freedom of speech. Can you abuse anyone? Sir, I have freedom of speech, so I can abuse. You have no right to abuse. Can you talk in filthy language while walking on the road? Because you have freedom of speech? Certainly not. You have a freedom to move, assemble, freedom of movement. Can I say I will walk on the road in an obscene manner? Well, I have freedom. I can dress in any manner I want. So can I display obscenity on road? Well, that doesn't mean so you have an absolute freedom. As per Indian Constitution, all fundamental rights are subject to reasonable restrictions. The state has power to enforce reasonable restrictions. They include for morality, public order, health. Well, I have freedom to protest, but I can't prevent the movement of traffic just because I have freedom to protest. Because there can be reasonable restrictions on these freedoms, including the freedom of worship. So therefore, in a secular country, the state, the government, the courts, the legislatures can impose restrictions on your freedom of worship. But the condition is this freedom, these restrictions should be reasonable. The word reasonable is very, very important phrase. Then who should decide whether such restrictions are reasonable or not? And what is the test of reasonableness? What kind of restrictions are considered reasonable? And what kind of restrictions are considered unreasonable? And who will decide this? Well, obviously, when governments or parliament or assembly impose any restrictions on liberty, it can be liberty of belief, liberty of thought, liberty of action, all forms of liberty. These restrictions, the government should keep in mind that it has no power to confine the liberties of citizens beyond the test of reasonableness. That is the reason Supreme Court recently said police can arrest just because they have the right, legal right to arrest. That doesn't mean they will use it every time and any time. So the Supreme Court recently said law allows for arrest of an individual, but having the power is different from using the power. This is what the Supreme Court said. You have the power, but how do you use the power? So the Supreme Court said, if you arrest a person, the person's liberty is curtailed. So when you curtail, though you have a power to curtail the liberty of a person in a given situation, that power has to be rarely used. Just because you have power, you can't go on arresting everybody and anybody. So therefore, the power to restrict also has a restriction. There's a restriction on the power of the government to restrict. So that restriction is at reasonableness. So the ultimately the courts have to decide whether such restrictions are reasonable or not. Well, the Constitution defines reasonable restrictions like public order, morality, health, etc. Well, just because you have freedom, you cannot harm the health of the people. So, therefore, the reasonable the restrictions. What then the next question comes is what could constitute reasonable restrictions on the citizens' right to profess, practice, and propagate one's own religion? What constitutes reasonable restriction and what is unreasonable restriction? Well, there are several judgments of Supreme Court over a period of time. The Supreme Court judgment is the law of the land. If there is a judgment by Supreme Court or High Court, it is as good as law, unless the Parliament or Assembly makes a law to its contrary. So therefore, Supreme Court and High Court are considered as constitutional courts, and the judgments of these courts amount to legislation. So it's the law of the land. You have to follow. So the Supreme Court has given many judgments on many occasions, defining what is secularism, what are the contours of freedom in a secular country. So then what did the Supreme Court say? Supreme Court said constitutional legitimacy is above your religious beliefs. So when there is a controversy, conflict between your religious beliefs and the constitutional legitimacy, ultimately it is a constitution that prevails. You can't say I have my religious beliefs should prevail over the constitution. Not at all. You have a religious freedom, but it has to be within the limits of constitutional values. I'll give you an example. There is a practice of triple talaq. A Muslim man can simply divorce his wife by uttering the word talaq 3 times. It's called instant talaq. Well, it is banned even in many Islamic countries. Well, it was practiced in India for a long time. So, when the Supreme Court said it is unconstitutional, well, those who believe in religion, some of them, not all, argued that it is my religious practice. Who are you to say? What right the government or the court has in my religious beliefs? As per my religion, I can divorce a wife by uttering the word talaq 3 times. It is my religious beliefs. But Supreme Court did not agree. Supreme Court said, your religious beliefs are coming into conflict with constitutional values of human rights, dignity of woman. So the constitutional values of dignity of woman are in conflict with the right of the Muslim man to say talaq 3 times in the name of religion. And Supreme Court said, when there is a conflict between constitutional legitimacy and individual beliefs, it is a constitutional legitimacy that prevails. I'll give you another example. There is a practice in the famous Ayyappa temple, Shabarimala temple, that women of a particular age group are not allowed to enter the temple. Well, this went to Supreme Court. Those who defended this tradition argued that it is our religion. It is our religious practice. Who are you to say? Our religious practices, our religious beliefs believe that women of a particular age group cannot enter Ayyappa temple. Who are you to say that this practice should not be there? So I give one example of Islam, an example of Hinduism. So the Supreme Court in the famous Shabarimala verdict stated that your practice, the practice of not allowing women into the temple, violates the rights of the women, violates human rights, undermines the dignity of women. Constitutional value is equality. So men and women are equal. Men and women are equal not before the Constitution alone. Men and women are equal even before God also. And Supreme Court said, nothing doing. Women should be allowed. Women of all ages should be allowed into the temple. So therefore, in a secular constitution, the difference between a religious country and a secular country, in a religious country, religion is supreme. In a Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the Taliban version of Islam is supreme. As per the Taliban version of Islam, women, the Taliban spokesperson told on a national television that what role the woman has in government. Why should women work in government? Their only business is to give birth to children and ensure children's development. Nothing more than that, he said. Well, that is their version of religion. But women's rights cannot accept this version of religion. But in Afghanistan, as it is not a secular country, the religious beliefs prevail over the constitutional values. But in India, it's a secular country. Your constitutional values prevail over religion. This comes to in every aspect. Suppose if somebody says, as per our practice, something against the human rights should be allowed in the name of religion, nothing doing. So the constitution prevails. So, but can the constitution intervene in the religious beliefs? Yes, but to what extent? On one side, we are telling that you have freedom. And the other side, we are telling that constitution prevails. So there seems to be a contradiction. The same constitution gives you freedom to worship, freedom of worship, freedom to believe any religion, practice any religion. But the same constitution says when there is a conflict between religious beliefs and constitutional values, it is the constitutional values that prevail. There seems to be a contradiction here, but there is no contradiction. The constitution is as interpreted by the Supreme Court in many judgments is very clear. The clarity here is secular constitution allows every citizen to profess, practice and propagate one's religion. The state can impose restrictions, but they should be reasonable. What is reasonable is two categories of restrictions are reasonable. In many judgments, courts have upheld this. One is a theory of essential elements of religion. So what do you mean by this concept of essential elements of religion? No government or courts or any other institution of state can intervene in essential elements of religion. So when it is an essential element of religion, nothing. You can't intervene. If it is a non-essential element of religion, governments, courts, parliament, assembly can intervene. For example, I'll give you a small example. Vinayaka Chavati should be performed on a particular day called Chavati, because Hindus believe that Lord Ganesha was born on that day. Suppose on Chavati there is some other activity. Well, government says there are elections on Chavati, so please perform this Ganesh festival not on Chavati but on Navami. Can government give such order? Absolutely not. Because the Lord Ganesha was born on day called Chavati is an element of essential element of religion. No court, no government can intervene on that. But can a government impose restrictions on the size of Ganesh idol? Yes, it can, because the religion doesn't say what should be the size of Lord Ganesha's idol. No Hindu religious text mentions what should be the size of Lord Ganesh idol. Instead, the religious text says, even you can just simply use little bit of turmeric, mix it with water, and keep it in a particular way, and still call it Lord Ganesha. So that is the worship, the way the Ganesha is worshipped. So there is no Hindu text which says that the size of the Lord Ganesha idol should be so much. So it is a non-essential element of religion. Well, for some reason, if the government or courts or parliament or assembly believes that such a size of the idol is not advisable, then there can be restrictions on that. So that is the difference between essential elements of religion and non-essential elements of religion. Courts cannot interfere, governments cannot interfere in the essential elements of religion. Then what is essential, what is non-essential? This has to be judged from the standpoint of religion, not from standpoint of court or government. So you have to understand whether it is essential or not essential only from the standpoint of the religion. So this is the first restriction. The second restriction, acceptable or reasonable restriction, is public interest, primacy of public interest. Public interest means human rights. Public interest means interest of the larger population. For example, I will tell you, we find temples and even other Islamic shrines also on roads sometimes. For road widening, if the government asks to relocate a religious site, can it do? Well, the controversy erupted even in Vijayawada during Pushkaras. So can a government relocate a religious shrine, whether it's a temple or mosque or any other religious shrine, for widening of the road? Well, that is the public interest. 10 years or 20 years ago, the road was sufficient for the traffic, but now it is not possible. Well, you can relocate without hurting the religious sentiments. There is a prescribed method as per the religion to relocate a temple or a shrine. If there is an irrigation project you want to construct, assuming that a temple or a mosque will be submerged, will you stop the construction of irrigation project just because the waters will submerge a temple or a mosque? No. Well, you have a primacy of public interest, which means the construction of an irrigation project or a construction of a road are essential in public interest. So when there is a conflict between public interest and religious belief, public interest prevails. In famous verdict, Supreme Court said, God does not intend to obstruct a road. Road is a public road. Road has to be accessible to everyone. So God never intended to obstruct the path. So that's what the Supreme Court said. So on these two grounds, essential elements of religion and primacy of public interest, these are the two criteria. It's a litmus test whether there can be restrictions on citizens' freedom of worship. So I told you, what do you mean by secularism? I told you what is the relationship between citizen and religion, state and religion, citizen, state and religion in a secular country or as per the secular constitution. So this is about constitutional perspective on secularism.